All right, welcome back to Draws and Fades, episode 109. We're going to be recapping the LIV golf event at Trump National in Bedminster, which me and Matt had the privilege of attending last week. I'm your host, Owen Vrabel, joined by, as always, my co-host Matthew Miller
What's going on? Welcome back.
and producer Nick Voss.
What's up, fellas? I'm excited to hear about this trip.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was great. It was a great experience.
Unbelievable.
I guess I'll just lead it off by saying Henrik Stenson won the event, which is incredible in itself. Obviously, he had a shit ton of turmoil coming into the event, having to, essentially give up his captaincy and coming to the LIV Tour for the Ryder Cup. He was, heavily scrutinized for that. I think understandably because it's kind of like a once in a lifetime thing to get the Ryder Cup captaincy. So I think overall pretty shocking that he won. He played amazing. The course was difficult. I mean, it really was a tough course. The greens were tough. The approach shots were tough. There were some really long holes. Par threes were tough. I mean, there really weren't a ton of birdie opportunities. I would say maybe the 15th hole, you really needed to make birdie there. But we saw guys, not hit the green in two and then have some tough chips. So we'll get into that when we get into the course a little bit. But Stenson winning, I thought was super impressive. And then Matt is rocking his four aces hat, and they've won now their second of the three events on
Dynasty.
What?
What'd you say?
Yeah.
Dynasty.
Great team win for the four aces. I actually saw someone make a funny joke and said the three aces and Pat Perez.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, in the way that they do the scoring, they shot 25 under as a team. Then it was the Majestic, Stenson's team with Horsfield, Poulter, and Westwood that shot 17 under. Then the Fireballs with Answer, Garcia, Ortiz, they were at 12 under. So
I will say, not like to get overly into it, but I kind of was like when the whole team thing came out, I was like, I don't know, this is kind of dumb. I'll probably just focus on the individual stuff anyway. The team thing was kind of cool. Being there, they kept showing it on the leaderboard. Yeah. And then we kind of even found ourselves when Stenson was up, oh shit, the Majestics just tied it up with the four aces.
yeah.
And you saw stuff happening on because we had obviously the privilege of being in the media center. If we wanted to grab, food or drink or whatever, but they had the broadcast up, and then at one point they were tied, and Pat Reed made a birdie and Westwood made a birdie simultaneously, and it was oh shit, they just took the lead, they just tied it back up.
Right. And I mean, I guess at the top of the board in terms of the team dynamic, obviously these teams aren't sponsored yet or anything like that, but they're going to be, the players are going to have some sort of ownership stake in them. So there's going to be more involvement in that in terms of then, having a stake in a business and what they're doing out there. But to be fair, in terms of the payments, it was 1.5 million for the team for first, 1.25 for second. So it's not a huge discrepancy there becoming a first and second. But for keeping track of the teams, who's really not playing well collectively. So Team Torque really needs to clean it up. They may do a complete roster switch after they were 10 over as a team, which isn't really even fully how bad they played because they don't take everyone's score each day. So at one point we were doing the math. They were about 25 over as a team. So
yeah, they were a lot of the lesser known Asian guys.
Yeah.
And they were struggling out there.
Yeah, they were.
I will say though, I thought it was kind of surprising. I don't know if you noticed it or thought much about it, but on the putting green and stuff, the guys were all hanging out together. The four aces, it was DJ Reed and Pat Perez were all warming up right next to each other and kind of joking and laughing. And obviously, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I never thought or heard anything about Reed and DJ being boys before that. But they were really getting along.
No, yeah, and he does kind of seem like an outlier in that team in terms of personality. But yeah, we did, like you said, have the privilege of kind of getting to meet and talk to a bunch of different people. But I think in terms of the team aspect, the one interesting conversation we had was with Turk Pettit's team, who we saw his girlfriend, his caddy's mom, his mom. We were all chatting with them. And for a younger guy like him, the team aspect is kind of cool because he's obviously he joins this new league, and to a degree, the golf hasn't changed. It is still an individual sport, but being on a new tour, really not knowing that many people, like he's kind of gotten to know the guys on his team, and I guess he's played a bunch with James Piot, and I guess like that kind of has made him more comfortable in terms of being on a tour. Him and Piot are definitely two of the younger guys, and they're playing with Hudson Swafford and Peter Uihlein. They actually had a chance to potentially finish in the top 3, but didn't play particularly well on Sunday. But yeah, pretty much from the opening stretch, it was a very cool experience for two guys who started a podcast 2 years ago. Never really thought of getting media credentials at any point. Got this opportunity. We got put on this, just from the beginning, we're in this like parking lot that is exclusive to media. And it was basically on like a extra range place where we were parking in the fairway on one of the extra holes that they had. We walk in the gates, get carted to the media center, and from then on, we were like, "Holy shit!" Like we're just basically behind the curtains. Like we were where all the players were coming out of the clubhouse when they were putting their scorecards in at the end. We had access to all of them, so we had some really cool conversations along the way. And I don't think we'll foreshadow too much on potential guests in the future, but we had some awesome conversations. So yeah, I would say, yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, it was really cool to obviously we watched the guys, for the last couple of years, we've watched them almost every week or as many weeks as they've played. But to be able to actually talk to them and get to know them, it was pretty cool because, some of the guys who we liked ended up being really cool guys. We got to know them a little bit better. And then even some of the, lesser known guys who, maybe we didn't know before this, they came kind of from the Asian tour or, other tours we didn't follow as closely. They ended up being really cool guys too. And now, I could say that we're fans of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so just to start there, I mean, Scotty Vincent, we kind of talked about as a running joke that he was going to be our guy. We was in that juicy part of the odds board. Seemed like a cool dude. And the Zimbabwean golfer who played in the Olympics, just seemed like a cool storyline. We ended up getting pretty tight with his manager / caddy for the week, Brett. And I mean, he gave us some pretty good insight as to what is coming up for a lot of these guys. I mean, so for some of these Asian Tour players, they're essentially need to continue to play well on the international series, and that's how they're going to qualify to play additional LIV events. So guys like him, guys like Travis Smith, guys like I'm going to butcher some of these names, but Saddam Quatoma, Kinoshita, yeah. Sorry about that. Kaiwa Kanjana. I mean, it's impossible to pronounce, but Inamura, they're all basically continuing to play on these Asian Tour events to try to get back into these LIV events. Like Travis Smith made 1.1 million at the event at Pumpkin Ridge in Portland. He's not sniffing any of that on the Asian Tour. So I think a lot of the talk in a lot of the golf community is about how these bigger name guys have kind of taken the bag and run over to the LIV Tour, but it seems to be a lot bigger than that because there are some big names there, but there's some other guys that these are life-changing moments in terms of being able to play for bigger money than they've ever had the opportunity to play for before. So yeah, it was great to talk to Travis Smith and his team, Scott Vincent and his team. I think there's some up and coming guys that we don't see a lot. I mean, they're not unheard of and they're not thousandth in the world. They're in that 300 to 400 ranking in the official world golf ranking. And that's with playing on the Asian Tour where, they don't necessarily have as many opportunities.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is not to get too much into this, but a lot of the guys, a lot of people are angry at the LIV guys and whatever, and are kind of harassing them online and stuff like that. We see it all the time on Twitter, but for at least the Asian Tour guys, they're allowed to play in these events and then still go back and play in the Asian Tour events. So it doesn't really make sense to bash a guy like Travis Smith like for playing LIV, like when like he can do that and then go back and play Asian Tour events too. Like why would he not do that? It's not like the PGA where they gave like this ultimatum. Like for guys like that, like it's really a no-brainer decision to come over here and do it. I don't really understand like the hate for that.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I will say, I mean, the crowds were, I mean, if they were coming out, we did not see many like hecklers or anything like that. I think it's easy to get warped into this like Twitter mindset where like everything you see, you think that's how everyone feels. There were big crowds there. I think they were condensed for the most part to some of the more popular groups. Like DJ and Brooks still have huge followings. So like people want to say like people don't want to follow Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka on a golf course anymore. Just insane. Like people love watching him play golf.
Yeah, it was interesting because obviously it's a shotgun start. So like people were kind of putting deceiving photos up there to say there was no crowds. Like, if DJ is starting on hole 4 and he's playing with Patrick Reed and I forget who was the third day one, but it was like a huge group to follow. Like obviously a large part of the fan section is going to be there and waiting for them to come to hole 5. So when they put up a picture like no one's even on the 18th hole, like it doesn't tell the full story because that could be Peter Uline's group.
Yeah, it was Abe the first day.
Yeah, so I mean the crowd was pretty good turnout, in my opinion.
No, definitely. And I think there were certain holes like that were more conducive to viewing than other holes. And in terms of like a 48-man field where you at a typical PGA event, I think people do come to see certain golfers just like they did at this event. So the bigger names are going to have bigger followings, and that's kind of what you saw. But there were big crowds on the par 3s at 16, the par 3 at 14, par 3 at 7. There were some really cool viewing holes there where the crowds were pretty into it. And it is interesting. I mean, they kept asking these questions to the players, and you don't really think about it too much, but they have music playing throughout the course, which we noticed on Friday when we walked the course the first time before players were out on the range or out on the putting greens. And it was like kind of a vibe out there. Like they're playing popular music. I mean, pretty loud. Like for guys who maybe aren't used to playing live tournaments with music, I think you could think it might be a distraction, but they all seem to love it. And that was another taking point. I mean, you can imagine that a lot of these guys were pretty happy to be there. And that's exactly how they acted. Like they were happy to be there, but they also were very focused on their routines of trying to play good golf. They obviously, some have made more money than others in terms of signing on with LIV, but every week there's giant purses up for grabs. And I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we haven't seen a completely random winner off the Asian Tour, obviously, yet. We've seen Brendan Grace, Charles Schwartzel, and now Stenson. Some veterans, so to speak, off the PGA Tour / European Tour. But the other guys are grinding. Everyone's grinding. I mean, they want to win. So it was just as competitive as any other PGA Tour event, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, they were out there working. I mean, we saw guys putting in work, after the round on the putting green. We would get there, pretty early every day. We saw guys, out on the range grinding. Brooks was out on the range grinding on Sunday morning. Got a little hate on my tweet on that, but apparently Twitter did not like that. But he was, and my point being was that there's this whole notion that like Brooks doesn't care and he doesn't practice, and like if he's playing well, he doesn't, or if he's not playing well, like he doesn't care, he mails it in, and that wasn't the case. I mean, he was on the range when we got to the course on Sunday, and at that point, after we watched him a little bit on the range, he came up to the clubhouse. Like Martin Keimer was walking around in shorts and a t-shirt, sipping on a smoothie. So like, it's not like he was just going through the routine everyone was going through. Like he was way ahead of everybody else's schedule, working on the range, which is interesting for a guy that people said didn't care to begin with and would care even less going to LIV. It certainly didn't seem that way.
Yeah, and I think like people have this notion that these events don't mean anything, and technically with the official world golf rankings right now, they don't. So we'll get into that in terms of what we think might happen, but like you could make the same case for a lot of the PGA Tour events that aren't majors. I think there's some really cool historic events like the Arnold Palmer, the Genesis at Riviera. there are some, historic venues that are consistently played on the PGA Tour that I think these guys will probably miss playing. But in terms of it being a tournament, it's just the same as someone going out and trying to win a PGA Tour event, except the purses are bigger and the fields are shorter, and they're playing 54 holes on a shotgun start with a team format. Like, it's just a different style of golf, but at the end of the day, they're all trying to do the same thing. And if you look at the leaderboard, I mean, Matt Wolff played great on Sunday, 7 under on Sunday to come and tied for second with Dustin Johnson. Carlos Ortiz, fourth, Patrick Reed, fifth, Paul Casey, and Sergio T6 with Lee Westerman, Gooch, and the young up-and-comer Turk Pettit. And then Brooks, Keimer, Grace. Like, you are seeing the cream rise to the top in this, on this tour too. So I don't know what these guys would have shot at the Detroit Golf Club, but I don't think that it's crazy to think that this is just as competitive in certain aspects of the PGA Tour. It's definitely not as deep, but I don't think someone that finished inside the top 10 last week in the PGA Tour just hops over to LIV last week and would have won that event just because they showed up. Like, it was a grinded out event. It was only 54 holes. You kind of have to be on your game once you tee it up, and it was tough to make birdies at this course. And Henrik Stenson, to his credit, played really good golf, and that's why he won.
Yeah, he played really good golf all week. He was playing tough. I mean, Saturday there was some wind, and that was like the toughest day. We didn't see too many good scores that day.
Yeah. So I think just to point out some cool conversations we did talk to Kessler Crane, Patrick Reed's caddy, for a bit on the putting green on Sunday, and he mentioned like at this point they are kind of put in a situation where to stay crisp and have a good current form, so to speak, like, and play tournament golf, like their only option is to play the international series, the Asian Tour golf events. So like, they're going to Korea and Singapore in the next 2 weeks. They'll get a taste of the world golf rankings, and then they'll come back to play in Boston for the next LIV event, which I thought was interesting because he also definitely mentioned how this was their decision. Like, he's not forced to play these Asian Tour events. So I think there's like this stigma out there that these guys all said they want to spend more time with their families and play less golf, and I think that's probably still true. They just currently right now, if they want to stay relevant on the official world golf ranking, they're going to need to play some extra events until the world golf ranking points do get associated with the tour. And judging by the guys we talked with, I think that that's more a matter of time than a serious question. They all felt pretty confident that there were going to be world golf ranking points associated with the tour eventually, which makes sense. I mean, there were 20 guys inside the top 100 overall in this field, and we've seen guys already slip on the official world golf rankings, but there's 7, 8, 9 guys under 40 to 1 on the official world golf rankings that are playing on the tour.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting too. I mean, there's a big difference between like Twitter perception and once like you get there and you start talking to the people. I mean, like, there's like this general idea on Twitter that like this league is not going to work. They're not going to get the world golf rankings. It's just going to be stopped. And then you talk to the guys who are in the league, who are playing, the LIV series, and who obviously have way more information than anyone who's just guessing speculating on Twitter. And like, that wasn't even a question. Like, it was like all about like, oh, like, we're pumped for the future. Like, this is all, like, no one was concerned that like it wasn't going to work out or like they weren't going to get the points. Like, everyone was pretty like, oh yeah, like, more guys are going to come. This is going to be great. Like, it keeps getting better. They were excited for what was to come. So it kind of seemed like a totally different tone out there.
Right. And to my point on the guys' reasonings for going, I think you would be an idiot to think that it wasn't partially for the money. I mean, I would think a lot of people in their profession, over 75% of a reasoning why you're doing what you're doing. If you're doing, and even if you're doing what you love, you're going to be doing it for the best situation for your family, which is making the most money. But to that point too, we talked to Matthew Wolff, and he mentioned how he's pumped to have a ton of time off. Like, he's not playing the next 2 weeks on the international series, and he's going to take his time off and then play the next event in Boston. And
he was a really nice guy, number one. Really cool, taking time out to talk to us for a while on the putting green. But he also was like, you could just tell he was really happy. He even said it. He's like, I'm just like, we're like, how you feeling? He's like, I'm really happy right now. He's feeling good.
Yeah.
And it was like a total, because you saw his body language on the PGA Tour this year and some of his comments post round and just kind of some of the stuff he said to the media over the past couple of years. Like, it seemed like the young Matt Wolff that everyone fell in love with when he came on the PGA Tour, just in terms of like this like smiling kid who was like joking around and happy. So it's tough to like. I feel like you kind of have to separate it too. Like, how can you say someone made a bad decision when he's clearly happier doing this?
Right. And I think he kind of mentioned, this is prior to him even joining the LIV Tour, that he kind of was focusing more on positive things and being in a better headspace. And that is exactly what he looked like out there. And it showed on his final round on Sunday, playing awesome. So I think he's in a great place. And I think eventually, in theory, there will be a collaboration between the LIV Golf Tour and the PGA Tour. And we'll see what the qualification system merits for, how they want to work that. But I think if the PGA Tour wants to have the best players in the world available to play in their events, like, they're going to make the possibility to coexist more realistic. So, we saw Taylor Gooch play really well. Like, there are young guys on this tour now who I think the PGA Tour had obviously marketed for plenty of time, that they could say that they're just, shooing them away now, but I don't see why they wouldn't want them to be a part of broadcast in the future. So that was definitely a takeaway from Matthew Wolff. He was looking good, playing good, feeling good. I'd say the only guys who really looked pretty disheveled out there were Phil, for one, which you can understand, playing about as bad of golf as you could possibly imagine. And Pat Perez also looked pretty disheveled out there.
Although I will say, I know you had to catch a flight on Sunday. Once the four aces were like going to be victorious, Pat Perez, like, complete 180, came back to sign a scorecard, fist pumping everybody, shirt untucked, like he was ready to collect his money and pop some champagne, because he was like furious after Saturday's round, and he played poorly, but he was like not giving anyone the time of day, storming off.
Well, and then we had that funny story on the first hole, which is like his 17th or 18th hole on Saturday, and like we heard this volunteer like talk to this other guy, like, oh, did you tell Pat, like, can you give him some advice? And he's like, yeah, I told him to go shoot another 5 or something like that. We're like, what? And he's like, yeah, I was like, Pat was coming off the green, and I was like, hey, I was the only one to clap for you, like, you want to give me a ball? And Pat was like, why the fuck would I give you a ball? I just bogeyed, like, I just 5.
Yeah, the guy was like, what an asshole.
Yeah, so he was pissed about that, but to be fair,
yeah,
you're a grown man asking another grown man for a golf ball. So
yeah, some of the actions out there, the grown men trying to get their hat autographed, it was a little bit weird, but yeah, Perez was a totally different guy Sunday. Once the four aces were back on the podium, he was pumped up. He was in a good mood.
Yeah.
DJ, I would say was. I didn't obviously know much about his personality before that, other than kind of seemed like a quiet guy. He was really cool. He signed a lot of autographs to the kids. Was pretty friendly to everybody.
Yeah,
cool to see. He could have easily blew us off, like Jason Kokrak did, which was pretty surprising because he's not nearly the caliber player as DJ who took the time to say hi, or some of the other guys that are much better than him.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. So we had a lot of great conversations with guys. Jason Kokrak was not one of them. Kevin Na also we pretty much avoided. It's nothing personal, Kevin, but was really nothing there for us to talk about. And then a lot of the older guys were like Sergio, feeling great. Like
he was pretty funny.
Yeah, he was hilarious. And then obviously Abe Answer, the man. Yeah,
we had a lot of cool conversation with Abe. Really cool guy, which is cool because obviously we are huge Abe guys on the podcast. So it was cool to get to meet him.
I'm glad you got that tequila sorted out so you can get some in Pennsylvania, Matt. That's good news.
Yeah, Fletcher Azul is confirmed coming to PA relatively soon, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, confirmed, but distribution issues is what he said.
Got to get that distribution sorted there.
Yeah. The Spanish team was all awesome to chat with. Carlos, Abe, Sergio, and then even Phil was friendly, even though he was playing like shit. And I think he made some good points in the post-round press conferences about the LIV vision is to try to collect some of the younger generation of golf viewers, which PGA Tour has clearly not done very well. In the last 5 years, the average age has gone up, and it's currently at 64 years old. So I don't know where they're getting their statistics on that, but that's obviously not good because the newer generation is the one who are buying your shit. They're promoting your shit online. And I think the LIV broadcast does a pretty good job of showing a ton of golf shots, not really getting dragged down with the monotonous stuff that the broadcast can get to on the PGA Tour. I mean, we've complained about the broadcast on the PGA Tour for years at this point.
Yeah, I think it was to that point. I mean, not to say it was 100% this way, but I noticed a pretty young crowd at this tournament. In comparison, I think there was a lot of young fans out there. I would say probably more young than old fans. Obviously, you had your older people going as well, but it seemed like it was a pretty young crowd that was very much into it. So if they're targeting the younger audience, it definitely seemed to at least work from what I saw.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely agree. And Sunday was exciting. I mean, Stenson played great, so he kind of took a little of the excitement away. We ended up trying to follow along with Matt Wolf on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, inside the ropes access was definitely a pretty awesome experience. So getting to be with these guys inside the ropes on the putting green, on the driving range, in the actual event, we're standing on a third green for quite some time, just watching guys come in. And it was surreal to be that close to them and kind of watch these shots up close. So nothing really but good things to say about the experience. And we'll see. I think we've talked about this, but there are rumblings that there are going to be guys coming from the PGA Tour after the FedEx Cup playoffs, and it's going to shake things up. Like if Cam Smith, Hideki, a few of the other big names come along. I mean, we've heard about Tommy Fleetwood, maybe Sung Jae. There needs to be some sort of coexistence.
I still have a gut feeling that Joaquin Neiman's going to go over there.
Yeah.
It just seems like a lot of the people that he's close with are all over there. It would make a lot of sense to me, but
yeah. We'll see. And obviously Bubba Watson's the newest addition to the crew. So I think they have a pretty good base of guys that I think are good personalities. They're good dudes. They've made, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but of the last 5 years of major winners, they have 12 majors between the whole group. So we haven't even talked about Bryson.
Yeah,
huge.
Yeah, he's obviously a big fan favorite as well over there. It was a really cool event. We had a great time being up close and personal. Crazy experience. Never thought, you touched on it earlier, but never thought we were going to get to do something as cool as that.
Right.
And to follow all these guys on, TV for so long and then get to see them up close and talk to them, it was awesome.
Yeah. And obviously we're going to get some guests on here at some point. We'll see what kind of strategy in terms of formatting we're going to go with the show. But hey, they have no correlation to PGA Tour. We can get them on to give some picks. They know the guys.
Yeah, no, well, that's true too. Yeah, no, I was gonna say something similar as well. I think we made, a lot of good connections, and we're definitely gonna have some guys on the show. But I think the cool thing about that is, at least from what we saw, kind of going into that event, nobody really knew anything about LIV. There's a lot of different people who claim they have sources here and this, here and that. No one really understood, a lot of it. So it was cool to get to talk to guys who actually knew what was going on and knew what they were talking about. We were able to learn a lot, and I think that's kind of going to be a cool thing once we start to, get some people on here that we had talked to. It'll kind of help people get kind of an inside access and actually understand what's going on rather than all the speculation we've been seeing online from people who don't actually know any of the facts.
Right. And it's definitely something that's going to be there will be changes over time. And that's kind of, I think Phil mentioned it. And I think you could laugh at Phil being his golf game currently is relatively laughable, but as an ambassador for LIV, they're very open to change and what could work and what won't work. And obviously the more elite players they get on the tour, the more intriguing people are going to be in terms of watching the golf. But they have a pretty good product out there right now with very above average field. In terms of like a short field, there's a ton of competitive golf out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. I think, overall it was awesome, and we have a lot of cool stuff coming moving forward. That came of it. We definitely took advantage of the experience, so we're really excited to share that with you guys very soon.
Yes, sir. So I think we'll leave it at that. We'll definitely, once the next LIV event comes around, we'll probably have some things in between. But I'm excited. I think it's just more golf. I mean, it's just like I mentioned last week. It's just more golf, and for the people that listen to us, it's more golf to bet on. We obviously did not hit Henrik Stenson last week, which in hindsight probably should have done because what a great storyline that was. I mean, there wasn't a guy probably more motivated than Henrik to play well last week and kind of shove it down people's throats that, he's going over there. He's past his prime. Like, why would he not capitalize on being the Ryder Cup captain? And the fact that they're not able to coexist currently, I think we'll see if that's something that continues. And if not, then I think the European team will feel kind of stupid for kind of shaming these guys off of the Ryder Cup. So
yeah, I think there's already kind of some controversy with that. John Rahm made some comments about it. He is lobbying for some of those guys to be able to play. Obviously, he knows they're going to get their asses kicked without them, but also I think he was sticking up for Sergio, saying he thinks it's kind of ridiculous that he's not able to play in it. And actually, I saw a pretty cool comment from Sergio that he withdrew his membership from the PGA Tour, and he was withdrawing it from the DP World Tour too. But after talking to John Rahm, he decided to keep that membership active. He didn't do that, and he hopes that they're going to have some conversations with the DP World Tour, and those guys are eventually going to be able to play in Ryder Cups and stuff like that. They're going to be allowed to do that. So we'll see what comes of that, but that was something that he had mentioned, and I think John Rahm had mentioned it as well, and we're going to see kind of how much pull those guys have.
Yeah, and we'll see. Boss mentioned it last week, but the relegation, the promotions, the team aspect, I think they're all kind of moving pieces in this puzzle right now, and we'll see what unfolds as this season progresses. There's only 8 events this year, and there obviously is going to be more in the season following. And if there are eventually official world golf ranking points associated with the league, then the guy's original statements about playing less golf in general kind of goes back to being a fair statement where if they're able to earn points in the 14 events they have, they're able to potentially play in the majors. And then, I can't imagine why PGA Tour sponsors wouldn't want some of these bigger name players playing in their events if they wanted to play. So,
yeah, enough big name. If we'll see what happens after the FedEx Cup. There's rumors about a wave coming over, and I think we'll know a lot after that because, like you said, if there's a couple other big names that go, Cam Smith. If you get one or two of the other, big younger guys, the PGA Tour is going to have to do something because you can't pretend at that point that you're just losing guys you don't really care about. I think that's already ridiculous, but it would be even more ridiculous if you lose like a Cam Smith and
right. And we had mentioned this before. I mean, a lot of the PGA Tour guys have been talking about growing the game and whatnot. I mean, there's a case to be made that these guys on the LIV Tour will be growing the game more significantly with having more international players. Like, you're going to miss out on the Australian viewers if Cam Smith comes, the Japanese viewers if Hideki comes, and there's clearly a bigger capacity for viewership with it being a streaming type service where a lot of these people just have the ability to watch some of their favorite golfers play golf, and it's more conducive to a lot more people.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of seeing it in the sense of like the way the teams are set up. I mean, the Four Aces is an all-American team. The Majestics obviously are the European,
all European,
like England, European guys. There's the South African team. The Fireballs are a Hispanic team. If you get like an Australian team in there, all of a sudden you're covering a bunch of different regions of the world with their own teams, competing there. I agree. It makes it more compelling when you talk about even just, this is just an example, but Mexican, fans watching the game and stuff, their two biggest guys, in maybe ever, I mean, for a long time, Abe Ancer and Carlos Ortiz, they're both over here now. Like, I'm sure they would much rather watch them than watch the PGA Tour. And when you start to see more and more countries, do the same, you mentioned with Australia, if Cam Smith goes over here and Leishman, like, they're going to rather watch those guys than, Americans playing on the PGA Tour too. So I think it's definitely a valid point.
Yeah. And the opportunity is open for this to continue to grow. And we'll see how the qualification system works in terms of like how you are able to join the league and how that works, how long people are, I guess, contractually just eligible to play every event. And I think the bigger names, obviously, in theory, have earned that, and some of the other spots will be up for grabs. So we'll see how it plays out, but definitely we'll keep our eyes on it and continue to tune in. We'll hopefully have some very cool things coming up in the future with some inside access to some players, caddies, managers, and see how this progresses. So from there on, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I'm very pumped for what's to come. With this podcast, we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. So I'm excited.
Love it. So appreciate you guys listening, and keep tuning in. Obviously, we're not stopping our PGA Tour coverage at all. We just love watching golf and betting on it. So nothing's going to change.
Agree.